My time. So good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. And Peter, if I could have you do the roll call.
Sure. Rickard?
Here.
Epstein?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Dornbrick here, and O'Grady.
Here.
Good. Moving on to announcements, Eric.
Sure. We'd like to welcome everybody to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District meeting. It's our special board meeting since it's on a Sunday today. The meeting's being live fed over the internet, and you can watch it at KMPUD.com. For anyone on the internet that would like to ask questions, please email eChristison, that's eChristEson, at KMPUD.com. The board asks that all members of the public identify themselves when speaking.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, comments from the audience. And if you wish to make a comment, this would be on a subject that's not on the agenda. I'd ask that you introduce yourself and possibly where you reside at Kirkwood, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. So anyone wish to address the board? Judy Flynn.
Judy Flynn, and I'm here today for my Homeowners Association, KMA, to formally request a copy of all GPS data from both years, the raw data, the data that has been cleaned up, and any formulas that were used to calculate our snow removal bill. And I will put this request in writing and send it on to everyone.
You don't have to put it in writing, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, verbally is perfectly fine. And I'm writing it down, raw GPS data, you want the report server
And
data.
on that data, we would like the date, the amount of time spent, and the location.
We will provide you the raw data and the report server data.
Thank you very much.
And you had the spreadsheet, that went out, so that hasn't changed. So, do you want that again?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Carolyn Scott, on behalf of the Palisades. I also own in the Meadows. I don't want the raw data. I don't have time for that. But our concern in the Palisades is last year we were off by 10%, so you capped it at 5. So we would have maybe expected 5 or 10 again, and now you've got us a 30% increase. That seems a little strange to us that it would be so different from last year to this year. And the one issue that we are unclear on is if an owner who is paying you separately for their driveway, who is paying for you to drive all the way over there? Are you billing the HOA to drive over there to do an owner's driveway? Because that is not right, and if that is what's happening, we would like that clarified and figure out how that can be done more fairly. Because if an owner comes up every weekend and you're plowing, and I'm paying for it out of my dues on my next door neighbor, that is not right with me. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Larry Parker, Kirkwood Meadows Association homeowner. Related to that, it'd be nice if there was an option for the driveway plowing to do it instead of a all or nothing, to be just on request, 24-hour email requesting the driveway be plowed and get paid or pay for each time it gets plowed, and maybe an annual fixed cost, but rather than having it plowed when no one's going to be up there for a couple weeks. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Bertrand Perrault, I'm lot 96, so I'm actually a driveway owner and with a contract, and I'm also talking for KMA when I try to look at the data. So I'm trying to be short. So basically, a general concept is snow removal contract actually must be a transparent process. That means whatever formula is used to compute the cost should be disclosed. There is currently discrepancies between the spreadsheet between the column that says 2 years GPS data plus driver feedback and the actual pricing. And so I don't know how this is different and why it's different. So we'd like to get clarification on that. Historically, base contract price was $750 per driveway with adjustment based on square footage and complexity as perceived by staff. I assume nobody disputes that square footage is a factor on the cost of snow removal. I mean, a bigger driveway is going to be more work to do than a small one. I know there is adjustment and complexity, but nevertheless, we should be able to find a coefficient, correlation between the square footage and the pricing. And so I'm actually demanding that the coefficient of correlation be computed between the actual proposed pricing, both for driveways and HOAs, to be provided to show how much correlation do we have between the things. As of now, looking at the data like that, I cannot do the computation myself because I don't have the square footage. I think your coefficient of correlation is going to be very low. And that's not proper. So I'm asking for that data or for the coefficient or both. Proposed price for the driveways change fluctuates from minus 56.43% to plus 100%. This is huge, this doesn't make sense. When you try to look at particular driveway, it just does not make sense. So I think there are not only issues with GPS data itself, but there is a lot of false positive and false negative. A false positive would be that you come on a driveway when there is nothing to do. I don't think we should be charged for that. A false negative would be somehow you don't get proper detection by the GPS system. It could be because of topography near the red cliff. It could be because there is a solar burst that actually impacts GPS signal. Whatever the reason is, we need to have actually systematic check on, for each snow event, how well distributed and how well the statistical analysis of the GPS data and how well everyone being actually accounted for. I mean, I know that Bob is trying to do some spot checking on the GPS data, but this is not what I'm asking. It's important to do it, but what I'm asking is statistical, global, and systematic analysis of the data to make sure we don't have bias and we don't have false positive and we don't have false negative. So what's important is that the way you compute your price is you do it in a relative fashion. You have your budget 100% and you try to divide it to everyone. The problem with that system is you basically spread error across the system to everyone. If there is an error because one driveway next to the cliff has not been detected, everyone else is paying for it. The way to avoid that is to compute an hourly rate. How to do that?
Bertrand, you're well over 3 minutes, and with this large of an audience, I think we want to stay on a 3-minute time limit. You're at 4 minutes now. So we need to stay with that fully so everybody else can be heard.
Could you email me your written comments? I can look at them.
Wow. All right. Frank Range Law 102. In a big discussion yesterday at the homeowners meeting for KMA, one of the things with GPS, there's no confidence whatsoever in the community for GPS. One was given to the community without any explanation, it just showed up. And everybody's bills changed, and some went up, some went down. There's a dichotomy between the east side and the west side, and everybody wants to get into attack mode and attack the PUD. I think personally, once it's explained, if it can be explained, for people who will accept it, that attack mode will kind of disappear, but I don't know if it will or not. But all I know is my driveway has not changed. And there's been an earthquake and I'm unaware of it, which is possible, I guess. But as far as the square footage and the dimensions of it, it's still the same way it was when I put it in there a few years ago. Now I know there's going to be an increase in fees because variable costs are going to affect the snow removal equipment. I understand that. I have no problem with that. But the rate that it's going up now doesn't make any sense. So I would behoove you, if you can, to answer some of these questions, to explain exactly how does it work. You should hear some of the horror stories that I hear. The tractor was positioned in the middle of Cable's Lake. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. So I think if you go into it really and explain it possibly, some of this animosity might go away or at least be solved, or maybe create some more questions. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Nancy Sherbet, Westside homeowner, KMA board member. I'm here to express my disappointment in the district, the PUD board, regarding the whole snow removal process. I believe it began last August into the fall when we first saw our snow removal contract. And initially we didn't get snow removal services because we didn't get a signed contract. It wasn't our fault. We had been pushing. You've seen me stand here time and time again and say, we need to know the information and we need to know it sooner, not later. So the relationship between the PUD and the KMA was tarnished. So now roll all the way ahead to where we are right now regarding this GPS stuff. My recollection is that when you went to GPS, it was an experiment. You were going to put it on some, maybe all, not real clear to me, of your vehicles to be able to study GPS and to be able to become a more efficient organization regarding that information. Roll ahead to April, all of a sudden you're using the GPS data to help make decisions regarding snow removal. So I'm disappointed, and it's frustrating. And if I was a teacher, I'd probably give you a big F on how this whole thing's been handled.
Any other comments?
I'm Tony Sarika, and from East Meadows. We're homeowners there. Our snow removal fees haven't changed dramatically, but we feel like it's fair and it's a scientific approach to how snow removal costs are being allocated.
Thank you.
Larry Parker with Lot 85 on West Meadows. I think that the area being plowed would be a much more transparent measure of snow removal, and then it puts some efficiency incentives on the PUD to be efficient with their snow removal. And I could see it being increased for amount of snow that falls, but if it was just based on the area that's contracted for each homeowners association, that would be much more transparent and less controversial.
Judy Flynn, KMA, just one final comment. We have all been urged by the PUD to get on your website and to use that to call for snow removal. And so when I know I'm coming, and I call in and say, gee, I'd like my driveway plowed, not my driveway, my parking pad plowed by 7 o'clock tonight. All I'm doing under this GPS system is increasing KMA's bill. And yet you want us to use this service. When we had a flat fee, that made sense. I mean, we could all call, let you know if we were going to come late, if we needed our parking pad plowed, and everything was taken care of. Now all we're doing is increasing the bill for our entire association if we do that.
Bertram, if you could, we don't want to get in a long discussion.
No, it's just on base fee. I want to make a comment on base fee. Bertrand Perroux from KMA. I think most of it, I think, have base fees. And the idea behind the base fees is to absorb some of the fixed costs to make sure that the district can actually recoup all the expense that it has. I think you should do the same thing for the snow removal contract. You should have a base fee. Anyone who wants a service of it need to pay that base fee, and that should cover the equipment, the depreciation, the training, all the stuff that are not specifically related to actually plowing a specific area. And that should be your base fee. And I think the best way to do that would be to use a square footage to assign the base fee in the valley. And then you may have a consumption-based area, which is based on user feedback, square footage, and maybe GPS data, but go slowly because I think your data is not correct as of today. And I cannot prove it now because I was not provided proper data. the data doesn't have the proper unit. Some events are just 4 seconds. I mean, what are they? What do you do in 4 seconds? So clearly, I was not able to basically tabulate the data I was provided to come back with the same numbers that KMPUD is using to do the billing. And so we need proper data. I don't have location also. Yeah.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I'd like to offer a solution, solution A or solution B. One would be that the district create an ad hoc committee for snow removal and do it soon so that you could gather information and help inform, everyone who has snow removal about all of this information. Or if that's too much to do, perhaps a couple of study sessions so that we're all in the same room looking at the same information and hearing the same thing so that we can get a better handle on what's going on. Thank you.
Follow up with this secondary solution. What is wrong with square footage? It doesn't change.
That's true.
That's my input. Short, to the point.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Mike Hudson, East Meadows. I think using GPS is actually a good use. Gives us more data to give us who's using the service, and those who use the service should pay for the service. So I think this is a move in the right direction. Whether the data is accurate, I don't know, haven't seen it.
That's the question.
I think as we get more sophisticated, it's definitely the way it's pay as you go.
Any other comments on any subject not on the agenda? Okay. Well,
I do have one comment, Carol and Scott again. What I see, and whether it's accurate or not, is that KMA went up, 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 and East Meadows went down, 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 and Palisades went up, up, up. So I don't know if it's accurate or not. It doesn't make sense to me that the 2 years should be so different, and that the initial estimates that the district was using 3 years ago should be so far off. So I would like to see some clarification, whether it's a committee or study sessions. Obviously, there's a lot of upset people. My owners don't even care enough to come to any meeting or even participate. So I'm sure if they actually saw the data, this 30% increase in our budget that we didn't have any knowledge of, that now we have to cover somehow, that they would be upset. But I'm the board president, and it's up to me to figure this out. So I would urge you to listen and help us.
Can I say something? Obviously, we can't take any action on this item today because it's not an agenda item, but I would recommend that we place discussion of this item on the agenda for our next meeting to come up with some possible suggestions, whether it's a committee, a standby committee, whether it's using existing committees, maybe finance and operations to address this item, so that we don't find ourselves in this position a year from now. Obviously, we're committed to the contracts that we approved back in May, but that'd be my recommendation because I just don't think we handled this very well. I know we were under time constraints, but I don't think this whole process has been vetted properly, and I'd like to see additional data that would either refute or confirm the GPS data, and I believe that by doing measurements that would be a step in the right direction to either verify or refute or somewhere in between, and continue to try to improve the GPS data. That's all I have to say.
Bob?
I just want to give people an historical perspective on this. So if we back up 2 years ago, everyone had a contract, and everybody's contract moved in lockstep, and no one could tell whether the values at that time were accurate and reflected proportionality across everybody or not. In fact, I don't even know where the original contract numbers came from. So the suggestion was, I'm sorry, Frank, do you want to interrupt me? Okay. So the goal behind this was to do was to be able to have a way to accurately measure it, since that's now possible and it's relatively affordable. So by using the GPS data, which has been in place for 2 full seasons, is on every single vehicle and is tracked, we had a way of knowing the time used in every location. So let me explain what a location is just briefly. The Kirkwood is divided up into a bunch of polygons, and polygons either represent a homeowners association or they represent a driveway. We then drove the trackless without snow. We drove all the vehicles for about a month, if I remember correct, Kelly, through all these areas to make sure that when the driver thought they were in a polygon representing a contract, that it really was. So we verified for about a month that the data was accurate. And there are cases when there'll just be errors, they're so egregious we don't even, if it's egregious, it's automatically thrown out. I mean, we don't have a contract to plow the top of Caples Lake, for example. But it is true that one time it reported that. So those sorts of things are thrown out. So what we actually get, and the only data, that we actually record is when a vehicle enters a polygon or when it leaves it. So for example, 4 seconds on a polygon could mean that it came in, it pushed some snow, and then immediately backed out. That would be a 4-second activity, and in fact, those things do happen. All of those are accumulated in each polygon, and that sum total is what's used to say what percentage of our time is spent in each account. At the end of the first year, we reported out in a board meeting, we reported the percentage of income from every contract and the percentage of time spent in every contract, and there were large disparities. What we decided to do was say we're going to limit the adjustments to 10% in the first year and make sure that it's consistent in the second year. So we've now finished the second year, and the data between the first year and the second year in terms of proportionality of time was roughly the same. So that's the background behind it. If there's a way to do this better, I'm sure there is. So we will, I took notes from what everybody has said, and we'll look at it. The data we can provide you, Judy, which we have already, but we'll send it again, is the entry and exit times for each event going in and out of an area. But I first want to say I'm really gratified that so many people came. This is usually a pretty lonely meeting. So the fact that you came and took time out of your weekend, I want to tell you how much I appreciate that. And the fact that we have an issue and some dissatisfaction, I'm sorry that happened, and I agree with Peter that we'll work on it and we'll do a better, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure. Our only goal is to make sure people are charged proportional with the amount of time spent. The reason why we didn't find much correlation between that and square footage is if you look at a place, I'll just mention one example. If you look at Cornice Court, because there's so little snow storage area there, in a heavy snow, the snow will be removed 3 times. The first time out of the driveway into the storage areas, when those get full, they get pushed out into the street, then the street gets pushed out again. So those are pretty small driveways. But the fact is the snow is much different there than in driveways where it's easier to deal with. I see you shaking your head. You don't think it's true. I respectfully disagree.
It's just one example. So you cannot distort the reality for everyone because of one situation.
No, that's why we wanted to know the time spent everywhere. Having an accurate time to us felt like we were more likely to get proper proportionality than only square footage. However, I love your idea of comparing it to square footage, because that would be a good check. And we do collect data, we do aggregate per storm event, and it's up to Jessica to decide when a storm starts and ends. But most of them have kind of a blue sky period, and so we lump them together. So we could also do checks that way. So I'm not saying there aren't things we couldn't do to look and see how does that vary the end accuracy. So anyway, that was probably longer than I should have, but I just wanted to give some historical perspective because I may not see you all in the same time again. But I encourage you to come back.
So the way I understand it, what you just just explained, if an owner in the Palisades keeps calling you every week, every Friday night to do their driveway, you drive through the Palisade polygon into the owner's polygon. So therefore, the HOA is being charged for all that time that you spend plowing one guy's driveway.
That's correct.
See, I don't think that's fair at all. I don't know how to fix it exactly, because I didn't realize, I didn't understand that. I can think about it, but I don't think that's fair at all.
It's very difficult to wrap your brain around what's going on with the GPS. It really is. And that's the reason I suggested maybe if you could somehow get that out there in the open, the public sector, and explain it, it might be acceptable a little bit more than what it is right now. But people are really having a hard time wrapping their brains around that. And there's a classic example right there.
The driveway contract should not impact HOA, period.
Is that up to the homeowners association to determine how to charge the individual homeowners then?
No,
We didn't know that. We had no idea that was what was going on.
We can't use this meeting to work on something that's not on the agenda. It's not fair to people that didn't know about this and didn't attend, so.
I mean, East Meadows is different than KMA is different than Palisades. It's my understanding that East Meadows is different in that your driveways are included in your snow removal contract, whereas in KMA and Palisades, they have separate driveway contracts. It's not part of the overall contract. And so it's not like we're all the same.
Maybe we should be.
There's been a recommendation that we agendize this for August. And Bob, do you think we could have some type of presentation to explain?
Not by August,
Not by August. Okay. Excuse me, Nancy, Carolyn, if I could.
Jeff, may I make a
Sure.
suggestion? Unless it's one of the only agenda items on the agenda, it may be a better idea to have a study session of some sort, which would be a very normal thing for a public agency to hold. I don't know that we've ever done that. But it is probably a big enough topic to justify a meeting focused on that, unless there's a very short agenda otherwise. But there's otherwise, that board meeting will go on and on and on.
I kind of think that by using the existing committees we have, we could probably narrow the focus down and answer some of the questions. You know, maybe whether it's operations or operations finance to
Actually, the operations IT, because the IT is the GPS piece and the operations is...
So that we can narrow the focus down before we have a study session. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that sounds...
So we would put it on the committee's agendas for our next committee meeting, and then maybe make a report to the board on our progress, so we can keep it moving, so it doesn't get... I just don't want us to end up in this position again a year from now. I mean, there's a perception that we reapportioned the community to the detriment of some and to the benefit of others, and that's a situation we want to avoid. Whether it's accurate or not, I'm not prepared to say. I don't want to go back to where we were 8 years ago. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
Eric, if meetings noticed, because it seems to me it should be somehow I mean, if Bob's not in the operations committee meeting, whatever the operations committee talks about will be valuable, but it won't be as valuable as it would be if Bob were involved.
Right.
You mean if he can give a presentation to the
Well,
committee
somehow,
without violating the Brown Act?
So to answer that question, a third board member can attend any other committee on which they are not on, but they cannot speak.
That's
So under the Brown Act, that's California state law, complain to your legislators.
Please join us, Bob.
Please. But I think a study session would allow the full board to meet and do that. I mean, we're going to be providing all the data to KMA. That's going to take them a while to digest. Bob said September, so why don't we shoot for a study session sometime in September? And we can do it around the Chili Festival.
Yeah, because more people are here then.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's Chili, the Labor Day weekend Chili Festival. That might be a good time. That gives 2 months to digest that Bob can do his presentation and we'll have more people here.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's a lot of volunteer time for me to
Yeah.
figure this out. And I don't think I can do it with the rest of my schedule within 4 weeks, but certainly by the beginning of September meeting, we could certainly be ready. That's September 2nd.
I
It's
just
still before.
wonder how you could compute price if you cannot have the data. I just
We
don't
have all the
understand.
data.
Yeah.
We have all of the price, we have all of the collected revenue, we have all of the professional time spent, and we divide it out. So we're not missing any data.
I would like to say I appreciate you all listening and agreeing to study it and do something. But I'd also like to say that having been president of the Palisades for most of 17 years, and having been on the operations committee for 6 or 7 years, it is mystifying to me that I do not understand. It's never been explained in either venue about how this data is being used. I can't wrap my head around the fact that I didn't understand that, and I was involved as I could be. So
I support that direction. I have a question, which is, the data that we saw, was it 50% GPS data and 50% qualitative input from your leaders and snow removal people?
No,
There was
it was-
some qualitative.
Yeah, so it was the average of 3. It was the first-year GPS data, second-year GPS data, and the qualitative data from our snow removal staff. So those 3 were averaged.
Thank you.
But you still change it after, so there's something else.
That was with the 30% cap changed at all.
I don't think so.
I know so.
Again, we should sit together. I could point to you where I think there is problem.
I'll provide the spreadsheet again, it's all in there. And the formulas too, so.
Okay, if I could go back, what we've, I think, agreed on is that we would have a study session, the target the date of September 2nd, and this will be on snow removal for the general public to attend and to learn what we know about snow removal and the GPS system. So,
I think you have a consensus. Bob, you're comfortable with that, September 2nd?
I'm not going to say I'm comfortable, but I'm committed. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Is that a regular board meeting, or is that an afterwards, or is that instead of?
It would be in addition to the board meeting.
we'll probably do the board meeting and then a study session to follow. I don't think it'll be a long board meeting, but we'll work that part out and put out the notice.
I appreciate to be invited for the study session so I can present my findings.
Everybody will be invited.
I would encourage you to allow sufficient time, or as much time is going to be needed for that study session. I know your time is valuable, our time is valuable too, but it doesn't sound like it can be accomplished in an hour. Maybe it can take a couple of hours, so I encourage you to allow sufficient time.
Hi, I'm Diane Alexander, we're homeowners at the lodge. And I was thinking maybe logistically, it might be better to have the study session before the board meeting, because I think what's going to happen at your board meeting, the comments that are open are going to be talking about this very issue, and then you're going to hear them twice possibly, just an idea. I don't know if it's possible.
Except that our board meetings start at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, so we could start the special session at 4 a.m. I see your point, so maybe we may want to change. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make a joke at your expense, but I just did.
It's no, you have to laugh sometimes, but it's a very serious issue, and I think that just to have, so you don't have conversations twice.
Right.
Judy, one last comment.
Judy Flynn, KMA. I would just like to point out to everyone that it is July, right? July 1st now, today? And we still don't have a snow removal contract that you supposedly voted on last May. And we're not supposed to even get it till August, and we had to set our budget last April 14th. And I bet the other one associations don't have a contract either.
No.
Okay, we have included, yes.
Getting back to what you said,
I'm
maybe
sorry.
we could, no, I don't know about that. But is it possible to change the board meeting to start time to 9:15 instead of have the study session first and say, okay, we're doing it for an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. And then,
I'm interrupting you again. I got to break this habit, but I think we want to allow some from 2 to 4 hours.
Okay.
And so it's much better to have the ending time be flexible than to cut the conversation short. That's my concern. But we'll figure something out. Maybe we do it the day before.
We can't do it the day before, that's the chili cook.
Oh, that's right. There you go.
You know?
So we have a constraint problem. They'll probably both need to be morning and afternoon or something.
We will find a way of doing it.
Yeah. Or listen to it twice.
Why don't you put the board meeting on Monday morning at 8?
Moving on to agenda item 5. Board members, corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? Do I hear any? If none, do I hear a motion to adopt the consent calendar? This would be to approve the regular board meeting minutes of June 9, 2018, approve the current consent for claims, and to review receivable shut-offs report.
Yeah, so move.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None?
Eric.
You're welcome to move up to the main auditorium here. Okay, we'll move on to number 7, number 8, items for board action, and we'll begin with finances, and Kelly.
Morning.
Good morning.
So we will start with May actuals on page 20 of your packet. The consolidated balance sheet, I did not have any new or anomalies to report that haven't previously been discussed. So unless there are any other questions on the balance sheet, I will move on to income statements. Okay, hearing none. Your combined income statement on page 22. You'll notice that there was an overage in commercial revenues, and this was due to the back billing of Chair 11 at $40,605. You'll notice that year-to-date revenues are up from plan by $321,000, and this includes revenues of $46,000 from our greenhouse gas auction proceeds and the $40,000 from the Chair 11 back billing. You'll also notice under cost of goods sold, there was a large, what we would consider savings. And this is due to, we had budgeted for $55,000 in diesel costs in case of a PG&E clearance where we had to use our powerhouse. We did not have to, so there was a large savings there, but we have to budget for those if PG&E decides to turn us off and we have to run the powerhouse. For next budget cycle, we broke that out into the 2 months where PG&E has generally had those clearances. So in the past, we had just stuck it in June to put it there, but for next fiscal year, we broke that out into 2 different months. Total year-to-date operating is up from plan by $666,000. And then I also wanted to note other revenues of $15,776. Those are the connection fees for the new home at Lot 17 in Palisades, also known as 540 Olympic Court. It's our first address at Olympic Court. So we'll move on then to page 23 for general and administration. You'll notice that there was an overage in contract services, and this was due to tax administration fees from Amador County at $5,331. This is something that's been new the past 2 years, I believe. And we will look to budget for that next year because it is something that's going to happen every year. Moving on to page 24, the fire department. You'll notice again that overage in revenues compared to budget, and that does include $3,865 in fire impact fees, which is a part of the connection fees for that new house in Palisades. We'll move on to the water fund on page 27. Year-to-date total operating is down from plan just slightly by $6,300. And again, as previously discussed, this is mainly due to the budgeting issue we had last year with the EDU calculations. Had we not had that calculation error, water would actually be performing better than planned. And again, you'll see the $3,524 in connection fees in other revenues for water. We'll move on to wastewater on page 28. Wastewater is down from plan by $36,000, but total operating is budgeted to operate at a loss, but should be noted that the operating loss is at $374,000 for the year. And again, other revenues for the connection fees are $6,137 in wastewater. Moving on to electric on page 30. The overage in commercial revenues again is due to the back billing of Chair 11 at $40,605. Year-to-date total operating revenues in electric are better than planned by $227,000. Again, that note in cost of goods sold is due to the $55,000 budgeted for diesel costs. Year-to-date total operating for electric is better than planned by $469,000. And other revenues for connection fees at $5,283. And we'll move on to propane on page 33. Year-to-date total operating for propane is up from plan by $91,000. And other revenues for connection fees are at I'm sorry, I have that marked improperly. That should be the $832 at the top there. I actually marked off the interest expense line and not the connection fee line. So the connection fees for propane are $832. And that is all I have on income statements for May, unless there are any questions.
It's nice to see the $250,000 overage in electric for commercial. Thank you, Vale.
Thank you.
Thank you, March.
No thanks for April. Seriously, no thanks for April. For anybody that cares. At Heavenly Valley Limited Partners.
Okay. That is all I have on May financials, unless there are any questions? Comments? No? Okay. Moving on then to cash flow on page 37. Bob, I want to note that this cash flow does include the new budget numbers. Oh, okay. So this is an updated cash flow through 2023. And you'll note in fiscal year 19, we have all of the updated budget numbers. This cash flow, though, does not include June actuals. Obviously, the last day of June was yesterday, so I did not have time to include any June actuals. So there's no change in the fiscal year 2018 numbers from last month that was presented at last month's board meeting. But if you move through to fiscal year 19, that does include all of the new budget numbers. You'll see that we've budgeted for the PG&E payment, the one-time payout in October. That was a change that came from the Finance Committee meeting. We had originally budgeted to happen in January, but with the speed at which our loan has been approved from Russ, and we're getting close to signing papers with PG&E, we decided to put that back in October. And also, we're going to need a little less money from operating revenues due to the fact that we were able to put a little bit more into our operating reserve this year, and we were able to not have to use as much operating revenue towards that PG&E payment in October. And our low point in this upcoming budget is December of 2020 at $1.3 million in total operating. Are there any questions on the cash flow with the new budget numbers?
I'm thrilled that we are projecting a low this year in December of almost $1.8 million after making the very large PG&E payment.
The feeling is mutual. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Moving on to then budget variances. Oh, I should just say also May EBITDA. I'm sorry I missed that slide. For May, we are above plan by $135,000, and year to date we are up from plan by $593,000. And for those of us in the audience that aren't accountants, EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization.
I'm going to interrupt a quick second. For those of you that are viewing this remotely, we're having issues with our internet service going up and down, so I apologize if you're getting disconnected. It's not your fault. It's on the district end. So for those of you viewing
It's only
remote,
wireless.
it's only wireless?
I'm wired in and it hasn't
Okay.
been fluctuating.
Sorry.
Oh, that's
Doesn't
okay.
make a lot of sense, but
Okay, moving on to known budget variances. The only change to this from last month was updated costs for the iPad app development. We're at $6,863 through May of 2018. Other than that, all of those other variances had been noted previously. And that is all I have on financials for May.
Okay, any questions from board members? And we'll move on to B, 2018-2019 budget presentation.
The only change that came, and I hope, did everybody get my email with the supplement? The change to the fire department and the overall. I don't know if anybody in the audience, Judy and Nancy, you got your change. So the only change that to report from the last time that this budget was presented is due to the fact that our fire department fundraising event happened on June 30th, we were required to recognize that revenue in fiscal year 2018 rather than fiscal year 2019, which is what we had originally budgeted for. So we are actualizing that revenue and have changed the budget to reflect that revenue being posted to fiscal year 2018. You've seen, if you look at the fire department, the summary sheet that I sent out in the supplement, you'll notice that I'm carrying over that cash to next fiscal year. So even though we have to recognize the revenue in fiscal year 18, the actual cash is being pushed forward through to fiscal year 19. So we'll put a little bit more the fire department fund for this fiscal year to carry that cash over, so that next fiscal year, we're not, giving twice as much property tax revenue to the fire department. Other than that, we've been working on this budget for 6 months now, and we're confident that where it stands, and staff does recommend approval of this budget, and we have a resolution in there that we'd like the board to act on if they so approve.
I have 2 comments. Bob probably has a question. One, I think we've been earnestly working on it for like 3 months. Because if I remember correctly, January through March was a lot of Russ activity. So 3 months.
I was doing a lot of work on the actual spreadsheet, so I feel like I've been working on it for 6 months. So.
Okay. And secondly, the Finance Committee has looked at this for 3 or 4 months, and at this point unanimously recommends approval. But Bob has a question.
My question is on the narrative portion that begins on page 60. So I reread that. Were there any substantial changes from last month's board meeting in
The
that
only
document?
change was we added that $50,000 to fire services funding. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, for the fire services funding study.
Yeah, so that was the
Okay.
only thing that was added to the narrative.
Okay.
We removed all the track changes in the capital budget narrative as well. But
Right.
that did not change either.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I just appreciate the work you've done, Kelly and staff. I mean, it really is, I think, a good budget. I think it's conservative. I hope it's conservative. And, yeah, and we have gone through this a number of times, and I'm happy with it.
Yes, any questions from the audience? The budget. If none, we have a resolution, number 1805. This will be approving the 2018-2019 operating budget and the 2019 to 2023 capital plan budget. Do I hear a
Motion approval.
Moved and
Second.
seconded by Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None? So the budget is passed. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
I just think it's worth commenting on how much better this process works than backing up several years. So I appreciate having the budget done on time and having the level of accuracy that's in it.
Thank you. I work hard on it, so I appreciate it.
Yes, you do.
No.
Can't print it. Lost it. Survey.
Do you want me to go print it?
Just can't print
Yeah,
We're dead.
Okay. I think I have one in my email.
it. You can
Okay, wait,
if you have it in your- see if you can print from your email.
Okay.
See if you can get to, can she print from her, can you get to the printers?
We have internet connection, we just don't know.
So she couldn't get to the printer then?
Probably not.
See if you, yeah, give it a shot.
Okay.
So I apologize, this is technology. I rely on my PDF to be open and it corrupted and dropped out, so.
Do you need a little moment to gather your resources here, Eric?
No, Rick just took care of me. so-
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Rick.
We'll move on to item 8C. This is performance reporting and the aquifer levels. And Randy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What's presented here is performance reporting that you've already seen from May. As Kelly mentioned, we have not finished June billing yet. Year-to-date, unidentified losses, electric's 12%, propane's at a negative 5%. We are anxiously awaiting to see that turn around in June, hopefully. Water, 15%, and wastewater, 50%. At the board's request, we've included in your packet a detailed month-to-month comparison on water and wastewater for your review, and also a staff report from Superintendent Dornbrook on the trends that he sees when he reviews this data on water and wastewater. From that data, we also computed our cost to treat I&I, just updating previous analysis that we've done.
You might mention what I&I is to someone.
Thank you. I&I is our inflow and infiltration, which is the water that gets into our wastewater system that we treat at the plant, that is not water that goes down a drain at people's houses. So it's our losses in wastewater, basically. So as you can see here, this is the cost, variable cost for wastewater this fiscal year to date, divided by how many gallons we've processed at the plant. And we've applied this to our 5-year I&I totals. So as you can see, last year in 2017, with the heavy snowpack and the multiple rain events, we had considerably higher cost for I&I. This fiscal year, we're looking similar to 2 years previously, but we do have 1 month left of the year. So I'll present this again when we finish up the fiscal year. But I just wanted to bring this before the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the month-to-month performance reporting or any other questions.
I just had one.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me for remembering, but 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
When I asked about this, he said there was some positive effect of the effluent being diluted. So this doesn't try to calculate any benefits from the dilution. This is just looking at the straight costs on a per gallon processing basis.
It is.
Okay.
It is the...
And I think Eric was not here at the time, but I'm judging he's skeptical that the dilution is a positive influence.
Yeah, yes, your perception is correct.
Okay, you didn't have to say anything. I can tell.
On his face.
Okay.
Any comments on the report, the staff report?
Nancy had a question.
I'm sorry, Nancy.
Maybe I'm jumping ahead, I'm sorry. So I believe the report recommended that the district add meters to its facilities. Is there any plan to do that?
It's not budgeted this year, but we can talk about it for next fiscal year.
Any other questions? Any questions on the staff report? Derek?
You know, in operations, we've talked about mitigation. Is that coming up either in this agenda or a subsequent agenda?
I was just going to cover it briefly. We've talked about it in operations. I thought we talked about it on reports of standing committees briefly then.
Very good, then we'll move on to, are you done with your report,
Yes,
Brandy? We'll move on to 8D, which is the 2018 ISO Fire Prevention or Protection Survey. And I think Sean kind of presented much of this and before each of the associations yesterday, or many of them, so.
Yes, sir.
Sean, you're on.
So we went through another ISO inspection, which is done every 5 years. We held our same rating of 4. The areas that they look to evaluate us on are fire flows, emergency communications, the fire department itself, equipment, personnel, and the water supply, and the inspection of the water supply. The areas that we're looking to evaluate and maybe improve on are the training that the volunteers receive, the personnel numbers within the department, and the testing of our equipment. And that's about all I had with for context.
For those who may not know, the ISO is the Insurance
Service Office.
And they rate fire departments based on a bunch of criteria.
The fire flows, emergency communications, the fire department itself, and the water supply.
And can you just explain how the rating is? A 4 a good number, a bad number?
A 4 is a good number, so 1 would be the top, and 10 would be at the bottom, and we currently hold a 4, which we have in the past.
And I believe that Rick reported a year ago or 2 years ago that a 4 is actually unusual for a department our small in our situation.
Correct, and some of it has to do with the emergency communication. We use Douglas Dispatch, so we get high numbers there, and then our water supply hydrants that we have, we get high numbers there.
And finally, I think the importance of it to homeowners is not only an indication of how well the department runs, it also can affect our insurance costs.
Yes,
and whether
sir.
or not we can get insurance at all.
Yes, sir.
So it's important to keep it at 4.
Yes,
Try
sir.
to get to 3 if we can.
When the district took over fire department, our rating was 9.
Wow.
So, just for historical perspective, we're in pretty good shape. But we should shoot for a 3 if we can.
What are those hurdles to get to 3 or 2? Is it like one or singular big item? Or
No, I think he
bunch of stuff?
indicated
Ladder
that
truck.
there's a few. We actually have a chance.
We'll evaluate and look at the firefighter training, the testing of our equipment, and the personnel numbers would probably be the most financial feasible way of doing it without a huge cost to the public or the district. There are other ways, as Eric mentioned, a ladder truck, but those costs can be huge to make that number go up in that criteria. Are there any other questions or comments?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Following up on that, the Fire Emergency and Funding Subcommittee report, and this is...
Yeah, so I reported this in the Finance Committee. I think that, I hope that next month we can actually have a more complete report. I mean, have the information we have in writing distributed to the board and to the committee and to the public and put into the board packets. But I'll just a quick summary. Our ad hoc committee looked at 10 or 11 different kinds of ways that we might find the necessary funding for the fire department. That necessary funding is someplace between $100,000 and $160,000 a year of consistent new revenue. And that range is all based on how much property taxes we think we can consistently allocate to the fire department. If it's very little, then we need $160,000. If it's substantial, it's $100,000. So we looked at 10, 11 ways of doing it, and we've narrowed it down now to 3 most likely ways that we want to discuss in more detail once Eric and I do a little bit more research. The first is a special tax. So first of all, let me back up. You may remember that our budget assumes that we're going to double the assessment on all properties. The assessment is currently 4 cents per square foot of built area. It would rise to 8 cents. But we all recognize that would put the full burden on homeowners, on people with buildings here, property owners, the resort and homeowners. And yet about half of the burden, half of the services that the fire department provides are to non-property owners, whether it's out on Highway 88 or day skiers, so on, emergency services, and so on. So what we'd like to do is find a way, if we can, to spread the burden to all who benefit. It's a very difficult thing for an agency like ours to do. We don't have a lot of taxing authorities and other kinds of authorities. So we have to be creative in how we do it. One way is a special tax, but rather than basing it on the size of a property or how much building it is, it's on the benefit received, which we would somehow define as intensity of use. So those properties that attract many, many people would have a higher tax than those properties that attract fewer people. We don't know what that method is. That's what that $50,000 that was mentioned by Kelly earlier would be for. It would be to hire a consultant who specializes in this kind of thing so that we could understand an objective, legitimate way of evaluating intensity of use or benefit received. The second that we can explore further is a sales tax. We cannot impose a sales tax. We would have to do it through the counties. And the counties would have to impose that sales tax only on Kirkwood, not on other parts of their counties.
That's actually already in place in Amador County, but not for Kirkwood. Kirkwood is left out. So the so-called Measure M is a sales tax which adds a 0.5% sales tax in Amador County specifically for fire and sheriff services, primarily fire. But we don't participate in that, so we don't get that 0.5% sales tax. So it is possible to have only Kirkwood have a sales tax, but all 3 counties would have to cooperate and create this thing. The third, and I'm very happy to see Terry here, Terry Woodrow, our supervisor, Alpine County, is we've begun discussions with Terry. We began discussions with Lynn Morgan, who is now not a supervisor, or won't be soon. So there will be a new supervisor in Amador, as well as some Amador officials, and Terry's trying to get a meeting for us with some Alpine officials. And this is to increase the share of our property taxes that we get back to support KMPUD. This would not be taking anything out of what the counties already receive, which is approximately 20% of the property taxes that we pay. I mean, they would keep that 80% that they already keep. It would be any new increment. So there'd be a new base year, and then we might get some percentage greater in subsequent years for any increment, any increases in property taxes. So that'd be a long-range thing. It wouldn't be immediate, but it would be something long-range. But I'm very happy and sort of gratified that Terry and Lynn and the officials we talked to were at least open to discussing that possibility. So those are the 3 main possibilities that we see. Right, Eric? Did I miss anything?
The only thing I want to add is which is new,
Yeah.
that you and I did talk about yesterday. There is something called the Upland decision. And essentially what happened was a group of swim parents wanted to fix the pool, and the city would not fix the pool. So they said, well, we're going to do our own ballot measure for a special tax to fix the pool. And the city at that point, or this community services district, I should say, decided that, well, this is a special tax and it has to go, this is a general tax and it has to go on a general election. It can't go on the June election. It had to go on the general November election, which has to coincide with the election of the board members. So they sued the city saying, no, it's a special tax with a 50% threshold, not a 2/3 threshold, because it wasn't generated by the CSD. They won. Went all the way to Supreme Court upheld the lower court decision. It was in dicta, essentially, but it's now, everybody's assuming that this is the thing. So if anyone in the community, not a board member, not staff, decided to go down the path of passing developing a proposition to increase funding, there would be a 50% voter threshold, not a 2/3, and so that's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. So just to give you a rough idea, I know this isn't our voter count, but if we had 100 solid no votes, at the 50% threshold, I need 101. At the 2/3 threshold, I need 200. That's twice as many yes votes I need to get on a 2/3 threshold with those numbers. So.
And is a voter a property owner in this case, or just literally a registered voter?
It's literally a registered voter, not a property owner.
Yeah, so assessment is property owner, and they get votes based on benefit.
Correct.
For special tax, it's registered voters.
Yeah, they have a weighted vote based on benefit.
And if we go the normal route, it'd be a 2/3 threshold. If we go that route, it would be 50.
On the special tax. In the assessment district, it's 50% plus 1.
Of property owners.
Correct, but not positively, only negatively.
Yeah.
The no's would have to be 50% plus 1.
It's voters in the service area or voters in the
Voters
county?
in the service area.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've done that before.
So anyway, there's still a lot to explore. So for example, I have no idea what sales taxes are generated, what sales are generated in Kirkwood, so I have no idea what a 0.5% sales tax would generate. I have no idea.
Should be able to get that information in case of that.
We should be able to get the information. We've not gone there yet.
Yeah.
But this is the work that needs to be done. So, and of course, we haven't done any calculation on what the increment of property tax we'd be asking the counties for if we want to do that. So that needs to be done. And
and we have to have more discussions with the counties about that. So, and then we have to figure out what the basis of a special tax would be. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we need to have it done by December, because if we want to have it effective in July 1st of next year, 1 year from now, there needs to be a 6-month period of time for everything that needs to be done for a special tax to take place. I mean, the voting, communication, all that stuff, to follow the process. So we have 4 or 5 months here to come to a decision about which methods we want to use. But those are the 3 that the ad hoc committee narrowed it down to. Now, we'd written up a communication for the community, but I don't think it went out.
It'll go out this week.
Yeah, I just asked that you take it. We had that, hold your calendar or mark your calendars. You can take off the barbecue. So, anyway.
Any questions from board members? One point is it's very likely we would do 2 things. The property tax would almost be a given if we can get something on that.
Right.
And then...
yeah, I don't think any one thing is going to be the magic. The one thing, I think we're going to have 2 or 3 ways of increasing these revenues.
Diane?
Yeah, thank you for doing this. I think it's really important, and many people do benefit by skiing here and having injuries. And is there a possibility to add something to the passes, the ticket sales?
I'm glad you asked that.
To add that, because I think that, hotels have hotel taxes, daily hotel taxes. Well, this is something that people come up, enjoy our resorts, and really benefit when they're saved from on the resort when you're injured.
Yeah, that was the very first thing we explored. That was the first of the 10 or 11 things, because it would have been by far the easiest, at least for the district. But Doug Perrini pointed out many logistical issues, and it just doesn't really fit with their Epic Pass strategy or sales. It just doesn't fit, because what would be added to a day visit would be so small.
Right.
It would be so small, it'd be like 30 cents or something like that. But basically, Doug said no. But I understand why. I mean, the Epic Pass thing is not just about Kirkwood.
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
I commend the district, the board, Eric, for pursuing this, pushing it, finally finding a solution to funding for the fire department.
So does that mean our grade as district and board goes from F to D minus?
No, Standish, because that's like different subjects. You've got English, you've got math, so fire.
Let's try Standish. I think that's what she's saying.
No, we'll F. Sorry.
We'll keep trying.
Yes.
But what's our whole overall GPA, though? That's
We're doing good in PE.
Okay. Any other questions on the fire services funding?
The only thing I'll add is the presentation that I attended on the Upland decision. I'll be forwarding that to the board.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
So you'll be able to review that.
Just, the action items, as I see it right now, are, first, it's really important that we continue discussions with Terry and Lynn's replacement. It's really important that we do that, and we do that like this month if we can. Secondly, get that initial communications out. And third, we need to somehow, I guess you and I can figure out, how do we do the calculations so we know what we're really talking about? If we talk about sales tax, if we talk about the increment. And we've got to decide as a board, is it 100,000, is it 160,000, or is it something in between? Because I don't know what it is. I know it's in the budget right now, it's plus 67,000, I think. But that leaves us with a $100,000 deficit or something like that.
67 is for what?
That's what's in our budget, I think, it's a plus 60.
Doubling of the assessment?
Yes, correct.
So with doubling, we're $100,000 short.
Yes.
of breaking even. The question is what's our philosophy on the use of property tax for fire? So that, I think, should be a specific agenda item for discussion. I mean, that one item would be a good item for discussion, so we know what our target is.
You think we're ready for that in August?
Okay.
Any other questions on the fire services funding? If not, we'll move on to item 8F, and this is the Kirkwood.
I won't be here in August, but I favor getting breaking.
Okay, item 8F, Kirkwood Chili Cook-Off, and back in April 8, 2017, the...
I'm sorry, I just processed what you just said. The only trick there is if we're not using any property tax money to fund the fire department, but we're talking about increasing the property tax revenue, there's an inconsistency.
Well, what I would love to do, and I just don't know if we can do this under the Russ, whatever it's called. The
Tier ratios.
The tier ratios, well, what Russ requires, tier ratios. What I would love to do is be able to go to the counties and say, we want this additional increment, and it will be specifically used for fire and emergency services. Now, if we could do that,
Yeah.
that would be ideal, because part of the rationale for discussing this with the counties is that it will benefit the counties as well as us. It services people coming through the counties out on Highway 88. It makes us more viable to support new development, which ultimately results in more property taxes and so on. But I don't know if we can say that under the Russ requirements.
We certainly can. Yeah,
Eric, if it's something new and specifically designated for the fire department, I don't see how there would be an issue with Russ there.
Okay.
It's our current property taxes that we have in our covenants that need to cover any meeting of our rest tier ratios. And if this is something new that is specifically designated for the fire department, I don't see how they could have anything to say about that.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I just want to ask you one clarifying point. There's nothing in our Russ agreements that say we're pledging property taxes. We just, if we
Oh, no,
apply-
there is.
There is?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, that's what I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of how we got our loans through Russ.
Okay.
We definitely pledged to
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Okay. 8F, the Kirkwood Chili Cook-Off. Just a little history. Back in April 8, 2017, the board approved KMPUD taking the lead on the chili cook-off with the KCA staff giving us some support. And that was the decision the board made because it does provide some good funding from that event. This year, KCA proposes to take that chili cook-off back, is our understanding. So we'd like to, Rick, have a report and explanation as to what has changed.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the KCA has been sponsoring this event for numerous years, and district has supported it either by having chili competitors through the fire department or actually running the registration. Last year was I don't want to say a challenge, but I know that the KCA had limited staff and they weren't really prepared to have the event having some staff changes, and so the district obviously took it over and the board approved it. Looking at the existing budgets, staff time, especially towards special events, excluding labor, of course, we felt that we'd be better off continuing on with normal district operations and not sponsoring another large event like you saw yesterday. Therefore, we made a recommendation to the general manager as well as John, who's in the audience now, that if they were willing to take it back, we'd be okay giving it to them. not mentioning that we probably needed to go through the board to do that. So that was my error, not informing the general manager that this was a board decision. So we're doing some housekeeping today to clean that up. But I just want to make a note that we did not include labor, district labor, with last year's event. Our net revenue for last year was about $5,700, excluding labor. If we included labor that was spent toward the event, we would have had actually a loss of over $4,600 sponsoring the event. So another good reason why we'll let them do it.
And in addition, is so you understand my thought process on this, staff has tasks that they were falling behind on and they weren't getting to, and this was across all the departments that were conveying this to me, that they needed to work on their jobs that their customers pay them to work on, and this was draining resources and time from that aspect as well. In addition to it being a loss, if you included labor, it was not a winner for the district or its customers in any fashion.
So that was really the question that I had when I first brought this up, because I didn't know where the labor was going to come from. I didn't know if we would be providing the same labor, it would just be with the KCA name on it, or if in fact we're going to be limiting the labor. I know that we will benefit some, there will be some financial benefit to us, but for what are we contributing then? In terms of labor, in terms of activities, what are we doing?
For this year, we know we have a 10K at the beginning of the day, so we have our staff committed to that till noon, and then we also are donating our tents, and we haven't fully committed to running any portion of the chili cook-off. However, I am aware that the KCA is going to donate 50% of the proceeds toward the fire department, and I think it's toward the avalanche dogs. So, it's a worthwhile, good community event. However, with the limited district staff available after doing the 10K, it's really a challenge for us. It's a long day for district staff. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a great event. What I'm just wondering is, I just didn't know if we'd be doing the same labor, but without our name on it.
No.
We won't be able to.
So, John, so the KCA has the resources to run this?
We're going to count on KCA, KPS, and a robust volunteer staff that we're putting together now. I don't know. This is a great event, and an occasion it does actually raise some real money. I guess I'm up next to understand. In my 3 years, we've seen various entities run it, and it's worn them out, to be frank, ours included. And so I guess I'm next up to see what's in store here. But no, it'll be a combination of our entities that I have some control over and volunteers. While I'm on the mic here, I'll say we desperately need some commitments for chili cookers and anybody who would like to volunteer. We're very fortunate to have Cheryl taking the helm again and really working hard at all this, and we're doing everything we can to support her. But that need will grow as we head toward the event, and don't be surprised if not under the umbrella of the KMPUD, but simply as individuals, I twist your arms a little bit to help us out. But yeah, we knew that the district, in their experience, said maybe it is not a good use of our resources at that time of year, et cetera. And so we were willing to take her back on because 17 years running, and it's a great showcase for the Valley in Labor Day, and it's a nice end of bookend, beginning with your event and ending with this one at Labor Day. It has some symmetry and makes some sense. So we'll give her our best effort and try to to the outside world. I think they think it runs great and it's seamless, and we all know that's not the case behind the scenes. But we'll do our best to keep that perception strong.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's a good explanation. It is a good event, and I'd like to see it. I think these events are important for the community to foster some community awareness and just interaction. So I'm glad you're continuing it. Any other questions on the event? With that, we'll move on to item 8G, which...
We should take an action for it.
Yeah, I think we need to have a resolution.
So I'd like to move that we approve releasing our responsibilities with regard to the chili cook-off and handing those responsibilities back to KCA.
Right. I'll second that.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye. And John, I do want to emphasize, I think it's a terrific event for the community, and this doesn't express any lack of interest in us wanting to be successful. We just don't want to own it. Okay.
Okay, moving on to 8G, General Manager Objectives for 2018, 2019.
I think the consensus amongst the board is to hold this over one more meeting so it can be digested a little bit more. Standish had, and of course he just left for the restroom, but Standish had requested all the prior goals for as far back as we could find, so those are included there so you can compare what existed in previous years. But I'm fine with holding this over until...
Is that the consensus? Because I view this as part of the budget process, and if we wanted to revise it in 3 months, we do that anyway. So was that the consensus that people wanted to wait?
I think that was Standish's request.
I'm neutral on it. I'm neutral on it.
I'm happy with them.
But I certainly want to hear from Standish. I'm willing to consider that.
Should we take a 2-minute break or just wait for him to come back?
Well, let me ask you one question
Sure.
on it, as long as I can.
Sure.
In thinking about the earlier discussion, if we assume what we want to do with snow removal is have it be based on time and not on square footage, then if we just have it be IT responsibility for looking at various ways of refining that, it's at least in one place and everyone can review it at the board level, and then I'd suggest adding a 7 to that, which is evaluate ways of refining the time measurements for snow removal. I mean, if we decided to switch back to square footage, which I would never recommend, based on looking at the data for 3 years, then it would go somewhere else. But assuming it stays as a time-based thing, then the question is, can we do it more accurately and more transparently? That's the way I would summarize, one way to summarize the earlier discussion. So I would add an item 7. Standish, I was just saying I was fine approving this, but you had asked to hold it off, so I wanted to hear why you wanted to wait a month. I think of this as part of the budget process. Yeah.
I'd just personally like some more time to read them all. We were presented in finance with just the finance committees. Okay. And now, on the other hand, if it's the consensus of the board that these are satisfactory, I know Eric has some comments on objectives. I just think it would be better to have another month, but to comment, frankly. And again, I won't be here in August, so you guys get to decide anyway.
So I'm happy either way. I'm happy to wait a month. I mean, I've read them over. I only have one comment in addition to what Bob has said. But I'm also fine with waiting and letting Standish have more time, or all of us have more time.
Well, I'm thinking all of us. Bob had some suggestion. You had some suggestion.
Yeah.
And I only saw him, frankly.
Yeah. So I'm personally happy to wait a month. I mean, it's in black and white. Eric's going to be working on it.
towards them
so.
Anyway, so that's not going to change, not having them officially adopted. I'm still working towards these goals because they're 90% there. So what I would ask, since everyone has the Word file, to go ahead and please add your number 7, add your 10 that we talked about for economic development, so I can get those incorporated in for the August meeting, and send them back to me in the Word document.
I do want to take this opportunity to mention that what I've got in mind for this number 10 for the plan. So first of all, the planning committee did review this. We got comments from a couple of members, and I think this one I'm talking about is going to incorporate one of those comments. That was from Cheryl Stern. So yesterday I attended the resort's community meeting, and one of the things that Doug emphasized towards the end of the meeting was his wish that all parts of the community pull together to address problems or challenges that we have. And so I talked to him after that. And then what I talked to him about mostly was parking. I mean, the other part of his conversation was demand has to show up in order for investment to occur. At least that's, for everyone else who was there, that's what I heard. There has to be demand preceding the investment rather than the investment preceding the demand. So I asked him, how does he expect that to happen? And what he said was, I think we already have the demand, we just can't accommodate it because we don't have the parking. So, to me, this fits into an economic development goal, because there are some things that the PUD can take an active role in, other things we can't, or it wouldn't make any difference. We can't go help the developer go develop some properties, for example. But what we can do is, for example, help get the restrictions on snow storage that limits, that according to Doug, has eliminated around 300 parking spaces. Help get that loosened up somehow. So he wants us to work together. I said, well, maybe this is an opportunity to work together. And so this fits into a goal. The goal, so now I'll tell you what I think the goal should be. I would like to come up with 3 to 5 very specific economic development actions in which the PUD can take an active role. We may not lead it, but we can take an active role. So this goes beyond simply the meetings we've had, like with the counties and so on. It's actually coming up with certain specific ideas. Standish already came up with one that he talked to me about yesterday at the barbecue. So I know of 2 already. And there's probably others that where we can either take a lead role or an active role to try to stimulate demand that will get the investment, that will get some growth going again in Kirkwood.
One I would suggest adding, if you don't already have it on your 2, and John, maybe he can expound on this a little bit, but simplifying our connection fee structure and making it more understandable to developers so when they come in they know exactly what it's going to cost to do it. Is that an oversimplification, or is that about nail on the head? So that might be one thing we want to consider is how, and we're actually looking on, you've seen it in the goals that we've already talked about, which is reviewing our rate structures, reviewing our connection fees. A lot of it has to do with out of service area, but they all come back and tie together. Getting our rules, our design standards, which we're finally going to have for water, wastewater, electric, propane. We're actually going to have real design standards. That's going to help developers and contractors understand what the requirements are. So I think that might be something you want to consider adding in, because that does help economic development, at least in terms of simplifying the process. You're not fast tracking, you're not cutting things, but you're simplifying it and making it understandable to, especially every contractor and developers out of the area, essentially. There's no real, aside from KVD, there's really no one in the valley. So that's one thing you may want to consider adding.
Okay, so I'll put together some wording for this item, including that. And but what I really want to do are 3 to 5 realistic, concrete ideas where we can take either a lead or active role in promoting, and that has some chance of being successful over the next 2 to 3 years.
I just want to add a little background to that. So 2 years ago, when the resort announced it was going to close early in April, this is when I thought mid-April was early. It's since advanced to new levels. I worked on a fairly strongly worded letter to Doug suggesting we'd like to meet with their management, and this is really moving. This is really reducing interest in Kirkwood, the place where your pass is the least valuable in terms of number of days. I mean, it could be interpreted very badly. That went nowhere, so instead I proposed, well, why don't we all get together in October? This was October of 2016, and discuss what could we do as a community to increase economic development. And we did that, and we came up with ideas, including several that were recently mentioned, but there was just no interest on the part of Vail of actually taking action on that. So I'm going to view his comments today as a sign that they're in a different position. that they want to actually do that, because I think we can increase activity here, and there's some things that we can do. But we had been using that as a vehicle for at least formally having the discussion. I didn't attend the last one. I was out of town, but I assume.
We didn't have any discussion on that.
But it's
Okay.
a good forum, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very glad to have those comments coming from them.
And they're hosting next time as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who was at the meeting, at the end of the meeting, he was very clear about his feelings about community working together. I had a follow-up discussion with him, and I'd like to take him up on it, and hopefully everybody will really do work together as opposed to talking about it.
The other one that's been discussed that you may want to also consider has to do with the employee housing component of the special plan. And I think I've got a bit of insight into Doug wanting to do things and then the corporate issues that handcuff him, just working through it. John hasn't been involved as much as I have on this, but Andrew Strain from the Vail side has been running it up through legal, running it back through corporate, running it back through legal, running it back down. He's had it for 4 months, and the three of us had come to a consensus that, okay, this seems like a good thing that's good for the community, and let's take it back to TriTac as a group to help, which again helps economic development. Well, it just got bogged down. I understand it's maybe coming back soon. I don't know what soon is, but just to give you an insight into what I've been seeing relative to that one component, it's probably universal.
Yeah.
But we could add that as an objective too, to help facilitate, give our support running that through TriTac, assuming we agree with the content.
Any other discussion on this? So it's agreed, we'll... Nancy?
Standish, I'm curious what your input was, or has it already been covered?
I have a proposed agenda item.
Which I'll cover in the appropriate section.
And then one comment regarding the economic development. I participated in the last meeting. I think the idea is a good one. And what you're discussing today sounds like, okay, maybe there'll be a little more meat on it. My take on the last meeting was, this was a total waste of time. I don't feel like there was any action that took place, other than there were people around the table who met, and not everybody was there. So I don't know how you get people to come. Like the first time you held it, it was great, but yeah.
In the spirit that reasonable people can disagree, I completely disagree with the assessment that it was useless. I think there's great value in having Caltrans there, the fire departments from the various agencies. I've been to every single one of them, which I think is 6. Initially, there was concern about the accidents on what's called Icebox Curve. Caltrans said there's nothing that can be done. 18 months later, we have signs, we have flashing lights that flash during the summer, even when there isn't ice there. So I completely disagree with your assessment.
But I will say it is hard to get the whole group together, and that's just a matter of the number of people and their jobs and their locations. So we continue to work towards that. But I agree with you. I think it's worthwhile, and it's something we need to continue.
And actually, in the economic thing, nobody wants the roads, so that was pretty clear. I mean, the roads are a mess, and we had to invoice Vail to get them to do anything. I'm not sure if anything's going to actually get done that will last, but even just discussing the roads, I think, is positive. And I made the comment to John Ryder afterwards that I'm sort of tired of hearing you guys come and complain there's no solution. Why don't you give us a proposal? We can't react to just the developer, the resort, everybody complaining about each other, and I think you agreed that you would come back with some proposals, no matter how outlandish they might be.
Your sentiment that meeting has been helpful, because listen, I've only been here 3 years, I don't have the 25 years of history, but heretofore, my road structure and how we take care of it seems a little out of whack, and it just got shut down. That's the way it is, that's the way it's always been, that's the way it always will be. So yeah, no pursuit on a solution. this economic development finally got discussed and batted around, and yet Standish came to me and said, come up with something. So I feel like, the green light got turned on to let's throw some spaghetti at the wall and see if a good idea sticks, and we're planning to do that. I have some ideas percolating that I'm not quite ready to, I need to vet out my own ideas here, but in that regard, then I think the meeting has been positive and helpful, and that some solution or some ideas that kind of never got any traction to even discuss are now being discussed.
We got any more discussion on that item? So we will move the objectives to the August agenda. Moving on then to the general manager report, item 9.
General manager report. That's Council Chairman Scotland. End of report. No, that actually is Castle Chairman Scotland. That's on a spit of land between 3 locks, mostly in Loch Moidart. And I had to wade across as the tide was going out to a little spit of land that came up at low tide, and hung out there for about 2 hours all by ourselves. It's a completely abandoned castle from the 1200s, from Clan MacDonald. And we crossed back as the tide was coming in, and that was fun and got wet. But actually had real items. So something yesterday, I had a good discussion with Terry, and she forwarded it on to me. There's a Central Sierra Economic Development Workshop coming up in July, at the end of this month in Murphy's, that includes Amador and Alpine counties, in addition to other counties, Calaveras, Mariposa, etc. Speaking of economic development, talking about that, I think it may behoove either a board member or myself or a combination thereof to attend this. I think it's $25. Registration's due by July 19th, so if anyone has interest in that, unfortunately the server's down, so I can't look at my email and give you the exact date. I think it was the 26th in Murphy. So if anyone's available and would like to go, I think that'd be great, and I would like to attend at $25. It's pretty reasonable. But it ties into what we're talking about. It also goes into what we talked about last meeting, which is getting the Tahoe version of this, getting a presentation from them and possibly working with them as well. So going to economic development, this might be something worthwhile. So I just wanted to bring that up and to see if there's any volunteers to possibly go with me then.
I'd love to, but I'm on the East Coast.
Jeff,
I could pick up because I can just come down the hill and pick up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my calendar. I may be able to attend that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that.
Okay, so if that's okay with the board, I'd like to
I think
attend
it's
that
great.
and
It's a
possibly
great
take a
idea.
board member or two with me. Okay. Talked about it a little bit already, the CSDA General Manager Conference. Extraordinarily helpful. We talked about this in personnel, but I've also conveyed to the board all the various aspects of things I learned as we were sitting in the various committees that are relevant to it. First one I've attended, great networking opportunity, great information, talking about upland decision, talking about 508 website compliance, building, team building and those sorts of things. It was a really, really worthwhile endeavor. It was in North Lake Tahoe, so it wasn't too far. And so I appreciate the board letting me go to that, and I would recommend they have a general session. I would recommend our boards, even if it's only 1 or 2 members, start attending CSDA conferences. I think there's a benefit to be achieved for the board members to go to these things as well. The next one is in November in Indian Wells. I don't think I need to attend again, having just gone to this, but it may be good for a board member to go. Some of you have some training requirements. You can't fulfill those at these conferences too. So something else to think about, another way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So appreciate it. Employee annual reviews. I don't want to go too overboard in saying this, but probably the first time in recent memory that they are actually done at the end of the fiscal year. They were completed on Friday, and I will be having Kimberly, our HR, Human Resources person, get those delivered to each of the employees by their supervisors, respective supervisors, in some case multiple supervisors if there's bleed over. But those are done, and so and the associated merit raises that go with that based on the performance review. And for the first time in recent memory, there will be no retroactive check. They will actually have the review delivered, merit set, and they will receive it on their first check of the fiscal year. So Kimberly was very happy, and I hope the board's happy that we're actually, just like the budget, where we're getting things done, we're getting done timely. I attended quite a few HOA meetings yesterday. Some of you saw me at the various ones, but it was actually very worthwhile. A lot of great feedback from a lot of the HOAs. Very productive meetings. Was able to get more people to attend this meeting just by and talked about signing up for our website, signing up for notifications. Got some great suggestions on notifications. Bob and I talked already about that, and we'll have some stuff to pursue in IT as a result. But it was great meeting the people. A lot of new owners came. I know Standish and Jeff, I introduced them to a lot of new owners that I had met, first-year owners, as we came through the greeting line. The Dr. Jose, who's down in Sacramento, and new owners in Sun Meadows, and so it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and we did extend an invitation to all HOAs that I would come, or somebody would come from the district to their HOA meetings, and about 6 took us up on that. So that was really good. And there are some going on right now that obviously we can't attend, unfortunately. But and then with that, I'll just give a slight lead into what Rick's going to go on to relative to Rex, but I think the recommendation I want to make out of that, there are some other groups that we may want to consider joining as a district relative to electricity and lobbying and issues within California. And so with that, I'll just segue right into you.
So something just came up this last week, and it's renewable portfolio standards, the RPS exemption. We received a phone call, and to better explain it, I would like to have Brandy come up and just give a brief presentation of what's going on with our recs. Oh, Brandy.
Oh, while Brandy's coming up, just a reminder, you guys all need to be on the fire truck at 11 at Snowcrest. Especially Standish. He said he wanted to be on top. I'm pretty sure I recall that. You had a beer, I think, and you said.
I remember. Been in that fire truck.
Oh, dear Lord.
No, it's safe.
So we did receive communication this week from the CEC staff about our renewable portfolio standard exemption. And as the board is aware, we are required to meet the RPS requirements. But the way the initial legislation was drafted, since we were not connected to the grid at the time, and since we had less than 1,000 customers, we've been allowed an exemption which allowed us to purchase portfolio category 3 RECs, which are not generally generated within the state of California, and they're less expensive to purchase. There has been an updated legislation that was adopted in 2016, SB 350, which effectively still allowed the exemption, but removed the forever part of the exemption. So once you are connected, you would then be required to meet the regular portfolio categories. The CEC staff has not adopted any new regulations regarding this, but they are now aware that it is an issue. The communication we had with them, we received an email and then had a follow-up phone call with them, is that they are working on verification of compliance period 2, which ended at the end of 2016. Their question was, did you connect to the grid within that period? Would our exemption still hold for that period? And then going forward, would our exemption still be valid or not? So they are internally debating that. We did consult with a legal representative, Justin Wynn, who's helped us with this in the past, who actually contacted us in 2015 when or 2016, excuse me, when they were debating this to see if we wanted to hire a lobbyist, if we wanted to try to change what the legislation was considering. And at the time, the decision was made by the general manager that we would just see what happened, that hiring a lobbyist was beyond our capabilities.
We wouldn't have influenced the outcome.
Exactly. So basically, at this point, we are waiting to see what the CEC staff comes back with, both on the compliance period 2, which is already ended, and compliance period 3, which is 2017 through 2020. It potentially could mean that going forward we will only be able to use a limited amount of Category 3 recs. And as you probably recall, 2 months ago we decided to make a purchase of recs and refund greenhouse gas auction proceeds to customers. We've decided to hold on the refund until we can get this straightened out, and we've contacted Shell to see if we can amend our purchase to include different recs. Going forward, if we are held to the category standards, we could either purchase a mix of Category 1 recs, which are in California connected to the CalISO grid, and 3, or we could consider purchasing power that comes with the green component. So this is a potential cost increase for us. It was very inexpensive, less than $20,000 a period to do the Category 3. According to Mr. Wynn, it will probably be closer to $100,000 per period to do the same thing, meeting the category requirements. Which is why we decided to hold on the customer refund for now until we can get a handle on this. But just wanted to let you know it did come up this week, and we will update the board as soon as we have more clarity from CEC staff.
I think the important thing to know is, one, we retain an attorney that does this and that specializes in this, and two, CEC is enforcing regulations they have yet to adopt, which violates the rulemaking process, which is a legal process. And Mr. Wynn pointed that out very nicely to them, that you can enforce regulations you have yet to adopt, and you can't enforce them retroactively either. So it was a meeting with staff and her manager. He immediately said, well, I'll call Mona and Jeff, which is CEC counsel that he's dealt with in the past, to try and get to the bottom of this, because it's clearly going to need to be escalated above their head, because they're kind of doing things wrong.
Yeah, my suggestion, if you could send me a memo. David Hochschild is the CEC, they're not board members, I forget what you call it, commissioner that's in charge of renewables, so I could talk to him.
Okay.
So we'll do that. Absolutely.
But I do think, since we are connected, it's fair that we purchase, and there's possibly the chance that we can buy renewables in January when no one else needs them. So it might be that the direct contracts during periods when we have a predictable demand could be a good way to mitigate some of this.
That's all I have.
Oh, and did you want to mention, so the other thing Mr. Wynn told us is that he also represents a group of like-minded entities and would we consider joining them, and we've asked for information on that we'll bring back to the board as well. So I think that's probably going to be important for us going forward.
Are we members of the Northern California Power Authority, or are we just observers?
Just observers.
Okay, because their members sort of team up and buy renewables direct from the generator. That's how BART works, for example. So, and BART's 100% renewable, including their diesel.
Huh.
Because the extension to Brentwood, they couldn't afford to do it with their current vehicles, so their diesel things, and so they actually do it with renewable diesel. So, there are public agencies that have found the lowest cost way to be renewable.
Thank you.
On a happier note, as you know, we had our KVFD fundraiser summer festival yesterday, and thankfully the weather was, I thought, really good. We were expecting real high winds, which made us very nervous, but with a million ugly looking sandbags around, we were able to keep the tents down. But I just want to personally thank the board, district staff, the community, Cheryl Stern, for all the hard work that went on before the scenes and during the event itself. We don't have an expectation of numbers. I think our overall count for pre-registration was just slightly under from last year. Kelly, helped me out. It was 300 and...
Adults, last year we had 356 pre-registered. This year we had 312.
Right.
Our pre-registration dollar amount, we had $13,300 in pre-registration and just about $14,000 in cash donations prior to the event. So anybody that came through the door yesterday will be in addition to that pre-registration number, as well as whatever proceeds we made from the silent auction.
So we'll certainly bring back a recap of the event at the next board meeting. I also want to thank Kirkwood's Epic Promise for their generous donation, as well as their support from their food and beverage team, and as well as the Epic Promise. I'm not sure if it's a committee or group here at Kirkwood, but they came through with 6 great volunteers at the last couple of weeks before the event, which helped out a lot, making sure that we were able to get the food out and hopefully reduce the lines that we've seen in the past for the food. But again, thank you to the community. And we certainly welcome the community's input. If you have issues, comments, questions, or anything that we can make the event better, we will have a recap meeting with district staff next week, but then we'll also have a Summer Festival recap committee meeting that will try to capture everything so we can make a better event for next year. But thank you. And unless there's any questions about the Summer Festival, I'll move on.
I'll repeat my recommendation from last year, which is the T-shirt should say, "We come to your fire, you come to our barbecue."
Got that, Jessica?
Yeah,
We should whip that up. Nancy?
I would just like to thank the Vail, wearing those T-shirts that identified your Epic Promise volunteers. It was really, really helpful to be able to identify who those people are in Vail that are, supporting this event. So thank you.
I have a question, which is, do we compensate Cheryl Stern or not?
We do not. And she donates a lot, not just her time, but she's also purchasing items for silent auction, which I try to discourage her, but she's up and beyond for this event, for our community.
I guess I made the suggestion last year, which is that we consider compensating for it. It's an enormous amount of work. There are a lot of people who've been on that committee who resigned but still continue to work behind the scenes, including Malene Smith, myself, my wife, and Sandy Goldberg. And I just know how much work it is gathering all those gifts. And I'll point out that the auction was, 2 full sides of a piece of paper. So I think you should consider compensating Cheryl in some form. I don't think we need to make her rich, but something.
We did try last year.
And what happened?
She was pretty adamant that this was a donation, but I'd be happy to try again.
Do you have an amount in mind?
No, I don't.
But certainly a thank you gift of some sort. A thank you of some sort would be appropriate.
I can say that from working with Cheryl, she's put in several hundred hours.
Yeah.
In silent auction.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm talking about outside that event, she
Yeah.
puts in a lot of
She
hours in
works
this
really hard.
valley.
You might talk to Bob, he was president, you weren't here last year when this came up. Maybe it's something nominal, like a couple of full epic passes for her and her husband. I'll leave it up to you. But I think that festival would go downhill rapidly without her.
So maybe we could have a resolution expressing our appreciation. Isn't that one?
So moved.
Well, maybe we'll draft something fancier and pass it in August in conjunction with the results.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Good idea, my suggestion.
Good idea.
Very good. Also in operations, the annual Consumers Confidence Report has been completed. It's on the district's website, and there are copies available here at the front counter. As you know, we're required by the state to provide an annual report of our drinking water, and once again, our drinking water is safe and it exceeds federal and state drinking water standards. Last year, this report actually is for the 2017 period, and as you know, we did have a few citations in reference to rain on snow events, but all those minor issues were resolved quickly, and again, your water is safe, and if there's any other questions about the drinking water and or the standards itself, you can contact me or the water superintendent, Derek Dornbrook. And then finally, we are offering our community chipping program as a as-needed basis. Typically, our staff will go out twice a month to chip. And again, we just want to remind the community that this is a service that we provide to hopefully reduce the surface fuels, which will help with defensible space. And that if those surface fuels could be 5 inches or less in diameter, stacked in neat rows along the property edge. We will be chipping the material back onto the property. We're not carrying the material away. But it's very difficult for our staff to deal with the material if it looks like a beaver dam, because it takes a lot of time to kind of sort through that and figure out what's going on. So for efficiency and for safety, we would like, there's a picture here of an example of the stacked material. If any material is left behind, i.e. willows, construction debris, 2x4s, we do not chip 2x4s, we'll leave that behind, and if it's a large problem or huge issue, we'll certainly contact the homeowner and let them know. But I think this program's been very beneficial for the community, and we hope to continue to offer it. So if anybody has questions about that, they can contact me, Brandy, or Chief Trebell.
Can there be a communication out somehow? Because I know in East Meadows, I still think there's the perception that there's a date for the chipping.
It was in the newsletter that went out.
Yeah. What I would suggest, I mean, this is the way East Meadows would work anyway, is if, the way it would work in East Meadows is that John Wien or Joan Pilar would get the information and then post it on our website and communicate it through their board and through our board and through the website. People, presumably read the newsletter, but I just think we need to be sure, because there's this continuing perception that there's a date. I saw it in our meeting minutes, HOA minutes, and so I send it out to the President's Council or something. I don't know, just something in addition, and include the picture too. I think that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, you could put it in every newsletter if Jess lacks information, which I previously heard. I mean, it's only a couple summer months.
Okay. That concludes operations report, unless there's any other questions.
Okay. Any questions, any more questions for Rick on the operations report? Very good. Thank you, Rick. We'll now go to the standing committee reports. We'll take planning first.
We're meeting on July 5th. We do not have a lot of planning issues at this point. We're waiting. We're waiting for the housing. We're waiting for parking. Those are the two big things that are just hanging out there. But the school site, well, that's the parking. So we're going to go over objectives and a sheriff's station, substation. I don't know.
The other one is planning for the date of the next meeting.
Yeah, that's on the next meeting. So, anyways, we don't have a big agenda, but a couple important things hanging out there.
Okay. Operations report, Peter?
I think the main thing we discussed this week was the I&I mitigation plans to do manhole repair, and we're looking at starting that in August after the soil is all settled in, and so we'll have the minimum impact on the meadow as possible. And I don't think have we actually decided on which product we're going to use?
Yeah, we decided on methodology. I mean, the exact product, staff will deal with that and use that, but the methodology is going to be internal repairs, limiting external impacts to the meadow. So we're going to go into I'll give you the short, this least engineer version I can give you. We'll go in, plug the major leaks with a 2-part epoxy to seal up the major leaks. This product can seal up to 50 gallon a minute leaks, of which we have a couple in the manholes. Then we will proceed to coat the entirety of the interior of the manhole with basically another cementitious 2-part epoxy that seals the manhole, and that can seal up to about 15 gallon a minute leaks. Final step is pulling off the existing lids and replacing the lids and the top ring with pressure tight lids and rings that can withstand up to 18 psi of pressure. That should stop all the ramping from bales, grooming of the area from getting water in, and it also provides resistance to water getting out, e.g. the 50,000 gallon spill we had. And that is the method that the operations committee came up with. So we'll see backhoes in the meadow. I made sure and made that clear to all the HOAs yesterday. You will see them in the meadow, but they're not doing huge excavations. The second component of that we're going to do this summer is the smoke testing. So if you see smoke coming out of the ground or out of a manhole, do not panic. We will put that in our newsletter now that the budget's adopted, we will start seeking out a contractor to do this work. Make sure we get a notice in the newspaper or in the newsletter for everybody, and probably do notification if you see this. It's normal. Don't panic. And that's the other component of it. That will identify any breaks in the collection lines or separated joints or offset joints in the collection lines that may be leaking as well. There's one suspect line, and this is going to help us do that. Then we can go in and video those particular lines to see exactly what's happening. The smoke test is your first step. Your video is your reinforcement of what's happening. So that's the plan.
Yeah, that pretty well covers what we discussed. It's the essential ingredient.
And what's the projected cost for all that?
I believe the ones we picked was about $55,000, and we budgeted $85,000. So the other component of that is smoke testing and videoing. We'll be using the rest of that $85,000 that was in the capital budget. And that is August. Peter is absolutely correct. We're going to start August. Brandy has the entire work schedule. It's the end of August. We're starting that work through about October 15th if needed. And of course, we'll remediate the meadow with the approved U.S. Forest Service seed mix and straw and wattles as necessary to prevent erosion.
Okay, that's the Operations Committee. Finance?
I'd say there are 3 things that we have not talked about today. One is discussion of propane rates. And I was surprised to hear Kelly make the remark that pretty much every one of our major services borrows from electricity. Did you say that? Is that true?
Everyone but propane.
Okay. And then propane shows sort of a declining capital balance. So if we were going to be able to afford second tank, Eric feels strongly, and I agree actually, that we need to look at those rates. Second of 3 is employee housing rent. Again, Kelly's in sort of a position of conflict because she's a renter as well as our head of finance, and there hasn't been a rent increase for some time. So we've discussed those possibilities, different rental rates for people who are employees and people who are not, as well as adding a CPI increase factor to that. And I think on both propane rates and employee housing rent, we're relying on staff to come back when they are ready with proposals, or at least outlines and analysis of both topics. And then the final thing is that the finance activity in the form of Kelly has shifted from budget to audit, which is an intensive period in August. Excuse me. Is there anything I missed?
No, that's it. When will we know the CalPERS, whether it's a positive or negative impact?
I am currently working on that with Moss Adams. There, of course, CalPERS made a change in their reporting between last year and this year. There were 3 factors that they included in the report last year. They only included 2 factors this year. So I had to work with Moss Adams to try to figure out how we apply that 3rd factor. So I am in the process of that. My plan is to have it done for presenting June financials at the August board meeting. So that, because I also have to have property tax revenues allocated and approved at that board meeting for audit. So,
August.
By next board meeting, yes.
Thanks.
That's all finance? IT?
So IT, we're in the final steps of preparing the customer survey, the biannual one that we'll send out. I think, is there one more pass showing it to the board, or we'll just be sending it out, right? Okay. We also, there were a number of ideas that came up in yesterday's meeting, so I encouraged Eric to add a couple more items to the survey that we can do. The other thing we did, we completed the first version of a disaster recovery plan. The goal there was to identify every system that we own and what we would do if it didn't work, and how we deal with that. So that's so Drew, working with Steve, has finished that, and we're looking at adding some additions to it. The other item we're doing is the ADA compliance. On public agencies are required to make sure that their websites are viewable by people with hearing, with both viewing and usable with people with hearing and visual impairments. And so, the first set of changes have been completed. We'll install those in the very near future. The second set of changes we're going to do as part of doing a refresh on some of the way it operates, because there's things that are missing, customer usable things that are missing. Some of them are a little bit obscure, so we're going to do a cleanup on that, remove the data that we don't use behind it, and that was the main topics. And it looks like we have one new one.
Is the survey like from 1 to 5 or something like that?
I believe so, yeah, it's the same as mine.
Can we pre-fill out the KMA one for snow removal? Just put a bunch of ones?
I actually have the same question, which is in the IT packet we had basically a draft that just sent out on April 25th. Bob commented with some questions. In light of today's discussion, should we have any more questions on snow removal? We have 23 HOA customers. I'm optimistic that KMA is an outlier on the low end with an F. So is there a way of getting that? And then the second part is when will we get the results back? Because I'd personally like to see the snow removal feedback before considering any of the topics raised earlier today.
I think we'll have it before the September meeting.
The plan is to have them for the September 2nd meeting.
So would it be possible
Consolidated
for you to
results.
take today's input, perhaps redline the second version in the IT packet, send it to maybe Bob and me for approval, and let's get it out the door?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, I can do that this week.
Okay. So
The plan
my
is to
thrust
do it.
is twofold, to factor in today's comments, and threefold. Perhaps consider asking them for their HOA, and let's get the data back before September.
Yeah, we were going to send these out with the bills, right? Wasn't that our intent, to send these out with this week's bills? So we'll need quick responses so we can get that out.
Bills are going out on Monday, or Tuesday, or Monday. So are we going to have this ready to go on Monday?
I guess I think it's important enough that if you need to do a separate mailing,
Do it.
do a good survey and get it out the door.
Okay. We'll do a separate mailing then. We'll just.
Just to clarify, Stan, which I think is
Fine. They didn't give us enough.
Okay, anything
Yes.
else? The Personnel Committee met on June 28th, and I think we covered everything in this meeting. It was primarily about all the training, both staff and the general manager. One thing I will suggest is if all the directors haven't gotten their ethics training
It's on
done,
my calendar.
you need to do that.
Are we aware of any of the the other agencies. Sometimes we were able to piggyback with South Lake Tahoe when they have a ethics training class available.
I can check with Kim on that. Kim and I
Yeah.
were talking about various ways.
And then I know that Alpine County has done it in the past.
I believe so.
For those of us who
Kim was
prepare
working on
a
different-
regular class over a webinar.
Yeah, Kim sent around an email with an option for that.
Regarding
piggybacking on another agency's
Oh,
classroom.
and there was a date?
Yeah, she
I'll
sent
I'll
that
send
out.
it to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
she sent that out quite a few months ago, and it was at Amateur Water Agency, and it's come and gone.
There's also an option for a webinar that you could all do together or separately at home on your computers. You don't even have to travel anywhere. But I'll talk to Kim about that and have her send you information.
Okay. Because I've been to the one at South Lake Tahoe with, and it's pretty nice.
Okay.
It's you learn a lot, and there's the actual interaction with people.
That's good.
Instead of the computer. For us
Okay.
Luddites.
I prefer the computer.
There's nothing else on standing committee reports. We have temporary advisory committees. I think we covered everything in your earlier report. So we'll move to item 13, general discussion. Opportunity for board members to have questions for clarification. None?
The only one I have is, we talked a couple months ago about putting together some sort of a guideline for communication guidelines.
Policy.
Anyway, I just wanted to remind that I still think it's an important thing.
Yeah, and it's on, I think it's on IT committees. Actually, I know it's on IT committees on our future topics.
Great.
Jeff, I'd like to take a few minutes and propose an agenda item, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And this may be a candidate for your economic development objectives, as Eric, with the C referenced, Eric McKay. And, I'd like to propose an agenda item, probably initially for the August meeting, and ideally for fuller consideration at the September board meeting, which is usually on Labor Day weekend, to encourage homeowner attendance. Yesterday afternoon, I also attended the second annual, quote, KMR community meeting, unquote, which we appreciate. Thank you, Vale. It was interesting to me that General Manager Doug Pierini started his remarks and presentation with how Kirkwood season's closing date is probably unlikely to change, how Doug personally loves spring skiing, especially in the Sierras, but those of us who love spring skiing are in the minority, and how Vale has to run a business responsibly, which I truly appreciate, because I do too. About halfway through the meeting, conversation turned to Q&A. The community was polite both this year and last year, but many of the questions both years turned back to resort closing date, which is, of course, why Doug led with this topic this year. One person yesterday commented that Easter weekend in 2019 is April 19th to 22nd, and that kids' school vacations are often the week before and the week after Easter, depending on the school district. So this may be a great marketing opportunity for Kirkwood to differentiate itself with its superior late-season snow and skiing conditions. Kirkwood closed on April 8th, 2018 this year. I believe North Star closed on April 15th and Heavenly closed on April 22nd. Based on this, my guess is Vale will plan to close Kirkwood on April 7th, 2019. The proposal I'd like to put on the agenda is as follows. If Vale keeps Kirkwood open after April 7th, 2019, with substantially complete operations until either the later of April 28th, 2019, 3 additional weeks, or 2 weeks after the last to close of Heavenly or North Star, then KMPUD will give Vale a substantial discount on all their electricity costs during this period, starting April 7th, while they're open. My idea would be a component number 2, that's component number 1. My idea would be a 50% discount on Vale's electricity costs during this period for each day of full mountain operations, including chairs 2, 3, and 4, and a 33% discount for each day of front-side only operations, excluding chairs 2, 3, and 4. And the final component of my proposed agenda item, number 3, is I propose this as a one-season trial that KMPUD considers offering to Vail simply to see if they will try it in earnest, with an open mind, as a relatively inexpensive experiment, to see if it works and to see how everyone likes it. Vail, the community, and KMPUD. Will Vail like it? They might. If it's a significant amount of money to Vail in the form of cost savings, and perhaps more importantly, if the customers that Vail competes for, in fact, ski Kirkwood during this period instead of Squaw Alpine and Mammoth. Squaw and Mammoth were the only major California resorts open during this period in 2018. Both Squaw and Mammoth are now Altera resorts with attractive Icon Pass, and they are Vail's major competition. Will the community like it? Almost certainly. I don't know anyone in the community who thinks that Vail closing their California resort with the highest base elevation, best snow, and least scope of operations in the form of chairlift and restaurant cost is logical. Will KMPUD like it? Probably, because we would sell electricity that we otherwise would not sell for perhaps 34 cents per kilowatt hour that costs us 8 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour to purchase. In summary, I'd like to ask the district staff to analyze this and provide the recommendation for the board, community, and Vail to consider and discuss. For example, their analysis might include how many kilowatt hours has KMR Vail consumed during this period when they've been open in the past, and what would that cost at current rates? How much money would we be offering to Vail in the form of cost savings during this period, and how much incremental revenue and gross profit would KMPUD receive during this period from ski resort operations plus skier and homeowner visits? I'll email this to you.
You'll email to each of us.
Sure.
Just as a starting number, Vail's lifts in March, of all of March, were 200,000 kilowatt hours.
So that's $120,000, $140,000 of cost total?
200,000 times
0.7.
12 cents is our delivery cost.
But their cost was 200,000 times roughly 70 cents.
67 cents, yeah.
So $140,000. So maybe that's not significant enough.
I couldn't comment on that. I think it has more to do with if we're trying to increase demand, being the premium late ski season is a question. And we could certainly, we're absorbing part of the risk, which I think is fair.
This is all part of the desire for everybody to work together.
I mean, if the goal is to minimize the number of hours open, then that's the current strategy. So, I mean, I'm very encouraging. I want to encourage the direction you're suggesting.
Is there a consensus that this should be on the next month's agenda and
Probably
possibly
September,
on?
since Standish won't be here.
No, I'm happy to have you start the work.
Okay, we can get started on it, and certainly Standish will be in touch and see the numbers.
Do you want to route this through
worth
finance as
considering.
well?
Absolutely. Okay. Any other comments from the board? I have one question. Where's this parade start?
Snowcrest.
Hillcrest.
Right? Snowcrest. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I tried to kill.
Got your bike decorated?
You are supposed to be on the
Is this
fire
actually for
engine.
real? I thought you've been making this up the whole time.
No, this is for, no, KCA basically, John's not here, but in the last, week and a half, 2 weeks, they said, hey, why don't we have a parade? And they reached out to us, would you participate? Would you get the fire engine? You get to lead the parade. We'll give you the candy to throw out to the kids. And we said, sure. So we have the fire engine. I think we have the ambulance. I didn't see it go out, Nancy. I know you were watching. So definitely the engine went out.
The doors,
Yeah, I heard the doors open.
KCA and KPS have made floats.
Yeah.
I believe that Vail had maybe made a float.
There's a marching band as well, which that alone you should go to see. For that alone, you should go see it.
Who's the marching band?
That's the great question. That's why you should go to see it.
I would encourage the directors to look for the fire truck. That's our float. So,
I think I've let everybody aware now, so I have an obligation. If I known about this, to change that obligation a bit, but.
It was a last minute thing
I
by
knew nothing
KCA.
about this, so.
Yeah.
okay. Well, those who can attend, try to. Okay. Thank you all for attending. The meeting is adjourned.